won't mind the phantom.
G'day, this is Expand the Phantom Podcast. Our website is chroniclechamber.com and you can subscribe to our podcast via YouTube or through your favourite podcast app. I am Jermayn and today we are going somewhere different. Every so often, in between creator interviews and reporting and reviewing all the latest Phantom comics and Phantom news from around the world, we get to go nerdy. And this is one of the cases, and I'm looking forward to it. Today, it is just myself, and I am joined by Matt Kyme. How are you, Matt?
Good, and I'm feeling nerdy too. Let's nerd out.
Glasses, we're all stereotypical nerds today.
Yep. Got them out
Now,
especially for this.
yeah, that's it. For those who have come in late, Matt is a Frew story creator who has created 5 Phantom stories that have been published. I'm sure there's plenty more to come, and has received several awards as voted by the fans for Best Stories of the Year. The issue with Heloise in 2022 was voted first, and second was The Manhunt. And in 2024, Enter the Phantom was voted the second best story. He was also instrumental with the storyline for the new Phantom video game. Now, while most know Matt as a creator, he is a fan first. He has joined us on this podcast several times before, so if you want to learn more about Matt, we're not going to delve into that in this podcast, but if you want to learn more about Matt, we would suggest get ready for it. This list is long. 162, 166, 167, 170. Most of those are him talking about his favorite stories. 189, 247A, 218, and issue 280. We will have all of those linked in our show notes if you have forgotten about that list already. Okay, enough increasing your ego, Matt, and talk about your past your past awards. Now, we are currently doing the Phantom Census. Now, I assume you've done you've filled it out.
Yep.
Now, we are gathering data and information from hundreds of Phantom fans around the world, and they are telling us what they like, what they do not like, and what they want to see with their Phantom. Now, we wanted to focus a little bit about some of the stuff that we that we have asked in the census, and that is about the stories and what makes them great and enjoyable for us fans. So that is what we're going to be discussing. We're going to be discussing the story elements that are important to the character. Let's get started, Matt. Anything you want to start off with?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that wonderful introduction too. So I think we'll discuss this as pure Phantom fans as well. Like we that's what brought us together in the first place, the love of the character. So I'm enjoying this idea that we're going to talk about what makes an essential story from our perspectives and see how that compares with what fans around the world think.
Yeah, and look, if you're listening out there and we've missed something, whether you agree, whether you disagree, please let us know with your comments. You can contact us personally if you think your comments are that negative and they might get censored by Facebook or something like that. You can contact us at chroniclechamber@gmail.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter or X, we're on YouTube. There's plenty of opportunities for you to give us your feedback. So, now, what story elements to you, Matt, are important to the character or important in a story that you read?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot because I approached the Phantom when I write my stories and script it out. I try and put myself like in the seat of the audience. Like I write a story that I would like to read, and that makes me think about the stories that I've read of the Phantom that have really stood out to me. And I think like a core thing of the Phantom for me is that when Lee Falk originally wrote the first stories, maybe the first 10 or so stories, the Phantom was very brave, very mysterious, but also very funny as well. And not like in a Peter
Slapstick
Parker.
style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Like not over the top silly, but he had really good one-liners. And
Yep.
I think probably like a lot of the superheroes that have followed have taken a lot of cues from the Phantom. The things I mentioned about him being brave and mysterious, they're all staples in superheroes. But I think maybe Falk might have been one of the first people to have, a really good sense of humor in his writing and to make the Phantom have these really quick little one-liners, particularly when he's being, threatened with death. He'll be in some tough situation. He'll make a little comment just to lighten to undermine the baddie, to let them know that he doesn't take their threat too seriously, even if it seems like he's just about to die. I was digging through some Phantoms a little while ago, and I was looking in particular at the big blockbuster issues that have been coming out since the early 90s. And one that I go back to pretty regularly is the 2000 annual. And you probably, just by looking at that, you might recall what's in it. This is basically chronological Lee Falk stories starting from Little Thomas going through to the Golden Circle. So people that aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, which I doubt because this is the Chronicle Chamber, Lee Falk and the original artist Ray Moore, when they did their dailies, starting back in the 1930s, the Phantom was in his infancy in a way, with Lee Falk's writing. He was sort of making up the character as he was going. Each story blended really perfectly into the next one. And when I go back and look at those stories, there's so many elements in those original stories that still hold up really, really well and are fascinating. The Phantom's romance with Diana is probably one of the biggest themes that goes through all of those stories. And obviously, his relationship with Diana continues to this day. But there was a real sort of urgency back in those old stories because there was a lot of hit and miss. Just about it. I think even in this comic alone, like there's about four people that propose to her, and she says yes to one of them. So the Phantom's always trying to get back to see her, but then he's having to go all around the world to solve problems. So for me, mystery, thrilling scenes, action, romance, interesting bad guys, different locations. These are the things that started off the Phantom so well, and the things that I look forward to reading when I pick up new issues.
There's a lot there.
Yeah,
So
sorry for such a long answer.
there's a lot there, and I'm sure, and it's not a exhaustive list. It's it's kind of like, what comes to you. You raised an interesting point about I want to go back when we were talking about the humor side of things. It's interesting because the Phantom, and I think this is one of the things that makes the Phantom so important, is that he's your Phantom, or depending on where you come from. And look, you've got Australia, Sweden, totally different demographic,
Mm,
totally different hemisphere, continent. Then you've got India, again, totally different hemisphere, totally different climate, different religious backgrounds, and even like a different humorous background as well. Like Sweden, from the little that I do know about the Swedes, they do like their slapstick comedy, and I think that's where uh where that kind of can be a little bit hit and miss with a lot of people in Australia and maybe even America, is where there's that different style of humor, which is an interesting kind of concept. And I think, like, I look at someone like a Peter Anderson, his stories and his style of humor. Well, actually, no, sorry. I think his style of humor is a little bit miss with a lot of Australian fans, but I've talked to a lot of Swedish fans, and for them, they all say, "Hey, his humor's spot on."
yeah,
And so I think there's a
the
little bit of that as
cultural.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and I think that's the beauty about the fandom, is that, and I haven't even talked about the Brazilians, people from South America, people from south of Europe, i.e. Turkey, Italy, Spain, France.
Yep.
which is different from Northern Europe, which is your Sweden, Norway. So, there's, and then there's, of course, USA as well. All the Yanks are
Yep.
going, oh, what about us? What about us? We created the comic as well. So, you know, having a character that can appeal to so many demographics is amazing. And to be able to have universal elements, I think humor can be a little bit hit and miss, but things like the mystery, the thrilling, and the action scenes, like underwater fights with sharks in a
Yeah.
big shark tank and stuff like that.
Crocodiles and yeah, that's right. In the first story. Yeah.
Yeah, but like even now, like uh like one of the most popular Frew Phantom covers is the Phantom fighting a shark.
Yeah.
It wouldn't get approved by King Features these
No,
days.
no.
But like that is a very iconic scene, and it's
Yeah.
like I'm looking, and it's carried on like with John Carr and the Slavers. You've got John Carr being killed. What's it when you're being
Keelhauled.
kill? Yeah, kill hauled underneath the ship, and he
Yeah.
fights it while he's being put under there. The Phantom
Yeah.
manages to. And, this is thrilling over 4 or 5 days. Imagine reading this and having to wait every single
Yeah.
day. Um, he manages to rescue him, kill the shark. This is all underwater while the guys are doing it, and then puts the shark, manages to tie the knot in the shark, and then that all happens by the time you know, it the shark gets pulled up on the other side of the boat. The reef is another scene as well where he's and it's quite amazing. And this is kind of like, your thrilling scenes where he flexes his
Yeah.
muscles and Cy Barry manages to capture that very, very well. And then he goes at the bottom of the earth, sucks it in, and then he puts
Yeah.
like a shark or something. It's just amazing having these universal elements that I think that does work quite well.
I think the the humor and the action, I think, will be appreciated by different cultures depending on their exposure to the older stories or the new ones. Like for example, in Australia, we're lucky enough to have regular reprints of the very old stories, but other
Yep.
countries don't have that. So we have
A
we're
greater
familiar.
respect and
Well, yeah,
understanding.
great respects, but understanding and appreciation. Whereas, like, let's just talk about humor for a moment. Um, Even Lee Falk himself, like, he really dialed down the humor and made his stories much more serious, like throughout the 70s, 80s, and particularly the 90s, where the Phantom would occasionally say something funny, but he was a pretty grim kind of character. And he was very family oriented. And, he was playful with his family and he'd go
Yep.
on endless vacations to Eden and spend a lot of time, water skiing with Diana and things like that. But the interactions with the villains wasn't usually very funny. And the
Yep.
villains weren't very funny. They were usually like pretty awful by the time we got to the 80s and 90s. They were all terrorists and all sorts of horrible things, drug dealers. But way back in the early days, the villains were charismatic and funny, and even the crimes were kind of funny, when they would be hijacking a cruiser or something like that. And also, if we think about the action sequences in the Phantom, I've always liked because they're realistic. If you
Yep.
can compare it with Marvel and DC, like where it's really over the top heroics, even Batman, Batman's just a human being, but he does like incredibly superhuman feats. The Phantom, probably in the 70s, 80s, 90s, like he never did anything like superhuman, but he'd do some pretty amazing things for a human being. What I like about in the very, very old stories is his stunts were
Believable
practical,
and
believable.
practical. Yeah.
Yeah. And even after he'd pull something off, he'd say, wow, I can't believe I did that.
The Billy Zane movie, like Billy Zane actually jumped off the plane onto Hero. And
Yeah,
then, and then like Chris Swanson, Diana goes, "Oh, I can't believe we did that." And Billy the Phantom goes, "Oh, neither can I."
yeah. Well, there's a scene, a classic scene in, I think it's in Adventure in Algiers, however you pronounce it. Or no, Prisoner of the Himalayas, where the Phantom has to get away from this palace and like he just leaps off the roof, jumps onto a tree and
Yep.
swings around and lands. And then when he lands, he says something like, "Oh, that would have been a good stunt in a movie." It's almost like he can't believe he did it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Dudley, the guy who's kind of a sidekick in that story, he goes, "Oh my, my heart was in my mouth or something for the
Yeah,
family." I think he goes along the lines of, "Oh, mine was a little bit lower than that," or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. I've got it right here.
For those who are on YouTube, as we're talking
Yeah.
about all these
Okay.
stories,
Yeah,
we
good.
will put them up there and all that as well. So, you
So I
know,
think,
that way you're not having just to look at our faces as well.
yeah,
Because let's
see,
face it.
see the joy. Well, people will be missing out because they won't see the joy in our eyes when we talk about these classic scenes. But I think the
Yeah,
context is important because if you if a kid picks up a Phantom story today and sees the Phantom doing these like mediocre stunts and he's not flying, he's not doing amazing things, they might find it boring because of the saturation of what they're used to, superhero movies and stuff. But these stories were written back in the 1930s.
yeah,
So these stunts back then, for their time, superheroes were a brand new genre. Like there were pulp heroes, but I don't know. I haven't, to be honest, I haven't read a lot of pulp stuff or even any, if I'm honest. But I imagine like the Shadow and Dick Tracy and guys like that. There would have been some stunts maybe, but mainly just car car chases and shoot 'em outs. But with the Phantom, having him, you know, fight a pirate on the edge of a giant container full of sharks, you know, that would have been pretty, I imagine, pretty exciting back then for newspaper readers, for the kids reading the newspapers. Being buried up to his neck in an anthill, you know, that that just wouldn't go down well in a Marvel DC comic. No one would care. But back then, you think, oh, how's he going to get out of this?
yeah. S- So you made mention of romance in as well. Like I never thought about this, and it wasn't until Roscoe. He made mention of that romance was important because it created and this might sound sexist, but it's not meant to be sexist, but it creates something that women can or not just women, but that can be relatable a little bit as well. So did we kind of lose that with when the Phantom and Diana got married in the 70s? And has there been kind of like a lack of romance since? And is it important just to have that touch, just to be able to have that, that could sort of appeal to someone else
Yeah.
as well?
Well, it's a different type of romance, isn't it? Like it's that there's this shift, like the Phantom and Diana, their relationship has always been, terrific, absolutely fantastic from through the different stages of their courtship when they were first meeting each other, and because he made his intentions known to her pretty quick. Like he was ready to leave the mantle of the Phantom, like way back in
I think it was
uh,
story three, I think it was,
yeah, Diamond
the
Hunters,
Diamond Hunters. Yep.
yeah, and that caused them to split up because
Yep.
she decided to leave the jungle after speaking to Garan and seeing just how important he was to the jungle. Um, when they were dating, the excitement of that, and the way that they'd always um, they'd literally hold up traffic when they'd be kissing in the middle of the road and things like that.
Yeah, or like, like the other scene I liked is when, Diana's mum, Lily, would write a letter and then they would like,
Yeah,
like jump on. There was a Wilson McCoy story, I think it was The Thuggies.
Yeah,
I think it was where they both decided at the same time to go see each other and like they passed each other on the planes, one going to America and the other one coming
yeah,
from America and stuff like that as well. We've talked a lot about the old stuff. So kind
yeah,
of talking about romance, do you think it's important that Tony DePaul has created this spark story which has got the three-way love triangle now
yeah.
between
I do think it's important.
Junior, Cardia, and Manju as well. So because it gives us that, well, I'll use the title, that spark of
Yep. Yeah,
romance. And then, do we need to, in the 22nd Phantom Saga, which is the, like the future time, 5, 10 years down the track, you've now got Heloise and Kit as the Phantoms.
yeah,
Do we need to have an introduction of a romance in those stories, whether it's Heloise, whether it's Kit,
yeah.
to be able to add to that as well?
Yeah, look, I think that there's a lot to unpack. If we go back to Lee Falk's early stories, 30s and 40s, I think he must have been a bit of a romantic guy because a lot of the stories had romance in it, and occasionally, or often, it wasn't even between the Phantom and Diana. It was other characters, like the flirtatious princess, and that one where there was the two movie stars, and
Yep.
the I just recently read it, but I can't remember what it's called. It might have just been called the movie stars. It's a
Yeah, the movie stars, yeah.
McCoy one. Um, so that had romance between, these two movie stars who were in this kidnap sort of situation, like the hostage situation. And there's so many as well. There's I forget his name, the big fat Raja or big fat prince that lost all the weight.
Oh, the Slimming of Prince Tagon, I think it
Yeah,
is.
and he became arrogant. And
Yes.
yeah, and but
I have a theory behind this. Now, back when all those stories were around, these stories were actually printed in magazines that women brought. So the
that's not where they
readership,
were originally intended for. That's where they ended up. So Falk wasn't
yeah, yeah.
writing for that audience, but he
But
was
what I,
writing for a wide audience because they were going in newspapers. And I
yes,
think
so
that
they were going,
the publishers of those women's magazines saw that, oh, this isn't just a boring, fighting jungle thing. There's interesting stories here which will appeal to our readership, the women.
yeah. So this is totally off script.
Yeah,
So I wonder if, because like I said, we're doing this census at the moment, and I'm not going to give everything away, but it is about 90% men who have filled out this at the moment. So I think it's safe to say that the Phantom is a man targeted comic. And
or
I'll
is it is it just more likely that men have got more time to sit down and do a survey? You
Hey,
know,
don't let our wives hear
because
that.
I'll tell you from doing years and years of conventions, the amount of women, young and old, who come up and say, "Oh, I love the Phantom," or older women will say, "Oh, I used to read the Phantom when I was a little girl. I used to love it. Me and my dad, or me and my sister, me and my brother, we used to read them. I had a big pile." And
Yeah.
even at my work, I'm a teacher, so there's a large staff. And when word got out a bit that I was doing Phantom stuff, the amount of women would come up to me and say, "Oh, I used to love the Phantom. I used to love reading the Phantom." So
So
I
I hear a lot of I used to read it, I
yeah,
used to love it and stuff like that. So I wonder why are they not reading The Phantom now?
yeah.
Why is it I used to, or I used to do
Is it
this, or I
just
used to
yeah?
read it? So
Well, is that
is,
just the problem with comics in general?
yeah,
That this, first it was TV, and then it was videos, and then it was, other media, always something new. Um,
because in Australia, and look, we do live in Australia, so yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. There was a it was Everyday Women or something like that, or Women's Weekly, where from like the 1940s to the 1960s, maybe the 70s, there was a weekly a weekly magazine, and it had the Phantom in it. I
Yeah,
also know Sweden had again, at the risk of sounding sexist, a women's magazine that that was published for a long period of time that also had the Phantom in it as well. So I just wonder any marriage between that, I guess, of why we have seen a drop off in women. We've also seen a drop off in women. We've seen a drop off in the romance, and we've also seen a drop off in the Phantom being in those mediums that women were reading as well. So,
yeah,
but I think we'll park that discussion there.
yeah.
Now, otherwise we'll go down the rabbit hole and then we'll kind of lose track and this will become a 2 hour podcast. One of the things that I think is important when it comes to a Phantom story is that you have to properly portray who the Phantom is.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I'm sick and tired of reading a purple Batman
yeah.
or a purple Tarzan just because, like you could read the comic and it's like, hang on, is this the Phantom or is this Tarzan? Is this just Tarzan wearing purple, purple PJs?
The Phantom stands out. There's opportunities to write different personalities for the Phantom because they've been different Phantoms, and
Yes.
you've done a lot of hard work with the Phantom Bible, and there are different characteristics and different mentalities and personalities of different Phantoms. But when it comes to gadgets and things like that, that's a tricky one. Like the Phantom to me is someone who solves problems with intelligence and with resources that they have around them. I like that the Phantom will be able to construct things if necessary, but not like in a Tony Stark or Peter Parker kind of way. No, no, no technology that's so advanced it's like magic.
Should he have a bit of duct tape with him because he's got his knife and he
Yeah.
can be like MacGyver?
Well, I used to like how like he'd get to Eden, like he would, he'd have that rail. I'm not sure what the
Flying fox type of thing.
yeah, flying fox kind of thing. And I imagine that the Phantom would be pretty handy with tying good ropes and like jungle skills,
Yep.
hunting skills, that type of thing. The Phantom using modern technology, you can't escape it. I remember, I think it was Duncan saying that a lot of the problems the Phantom faced in some of the comics he could solve if he just had a mobile phone.
Duncan Stories is not afraid of using a mobile phone.
Yeah,
Mike Bullock has done that as well.
I'm afraid
Uh,
of it. That's why I put my stories
yeah,
in the past. I
yeah.
kind of feel like the Phantom to me, and people might completely disagree, and that's fine. But to me, the 21st Phantom is locked in time. To me, like he's active in the 30s and 40s, maybe the 50s, maybe the 60s at the latest. But yeah, and I've made no secret of that. My stories are not set in 2025.
Mm, mm.
And I don't like force that down people's throats. I don't say 1930. Well, I mean sometimes I do, but with stories like the issue of Heloise and Manhunt, like I haven't explicitly said what the timeline is, but there's
There's visual
clues.
clues.
Yeah, you look
Yeah.
at the Jeep, you look at the automobiles, you look at the fashions, the technology they have. I would find it difficult personally. Others wouldn't to write a modern story with the Phantom. I think that's the beauty of the Phantom as well. That and what separates him from other heroes like Batman and characters like that, which are increasingly like depending on technology. Like the Phantom doesn't need a Phantom mobile or a jet or like some super complex contact lenses that can identify this, that, and the other. He just needs what he's got: his
Mm,
brains, his guns, his intelligence,
mm, mm.
his sense of humor.
Yeah. Look, I would love to talk more about technology and whether he needs a nerd in the van or something like that,
Yeah,
but I think we'll park that discussion as well.
yeah,
The difference between the Phantom and a lot of other characters is that he's born as the Phantom. from an early age, he's training to become the Phantom. Where you have a lot of things like whether it's Peter Parker, he was bitten by a spider and it was thrust upon him. Tony Stark, again, he felt guilty of what he did, so it got thrust upon him.
Yeah.
Batman maybe a little bit more like the Phantom in the sense that he kind of, trained from an earlier age to become a Cape Crusader. But a lot of these guys had origin stories from humble beginnings, where the
Yeah.
Phantom's different from that. He didn't
And
he didn't
also,
become the Phantom
yeah.
by accident.
And the Phantom has been mentored, like you could say that Batman is sort of similar because he was mentored by Alfred, and Alfred was a stand-up character.
Yeah.
But with the Phantom, it's unique because the Phantom mentors the next Phantom. And
Yes.
so, like they're in training from the day they're born. That's I tried to represent that in my stories with both children,
Mm,
Kit and
mm.
Heloise, that they're they're basically like going through superhero jungle survival academy just in
Yeah.
their day-to-day life.
I remember there's a story, Cloud Pirates, which featured the 19th Phantom, issue 926, around there.
Yeah, that was like one of the first ones I ever bought.
One of the first ones I ever read. I love that story. Where
Orange
in
cover,
in sorry?
orange cover.
Yes. In that story, um, the Phantom's going, like he's having a discussion with the Banda Chief, and they're talking about the plane, and the Banda Chief is like, oh, modern technology, rah rah rah, rah. And then the Phantom sees that, and he's like, well, hang on, this is how. And this is the thing where the Phantom's always training, always trying to use things to be able to fight crime better. The bad guys are going to use technology. The bad guys are going to use planes for piracy. So I need to learn how to have a pilot license, or know the technology, know how to fix a
Yeah,
plane, know how to fly a plane, and all that type of stuff. Because if the bad guys are going to do it, I need to do it to be able to stop the bad guys. And I think that's a very important element of who the cat of the Phantom is. Not only he should not be afraid of using modern technology, but he's also that's who he is. He's like, okay, what do I need to do to become a better Phantom? Do I
yeah,
need to get my
adapt.
plane
Yeah,
license? Do I need to learn how to scuba dive? Do I need to learn how to shoot bow and arrows, how to throw a knife, how to shoot pistols, how to be trained as a sniper, to be able to
yeah,
use jungle training to be able to trap people, or like in Hoogan's Revenge. And
yeah,
he you need the Phantom needs to almost become like everything in any
yeah.
situation to be able to defeat, or to be able to solve the situation.
And he should take the same approach with the Jungle Patrol because he's the
Mm,
second commander. So he should be insisting that the Jungle Patrol are completely up to date with technology and with their resources as well. I like there was a very old story about the Jungle Patrol where a reporter goes and Colonel Weeks lets him do a story on them. And there's this gag throughout it that it's a slow day for the Jungle Patrol. Like they go into
mm,
town and there's this massive brawl, and like one single patrolman goes in and just knocks them all out. Like it's no problem. And it
yeah,
just sort of shows that like they are the absolute elite
yeah.
soldiers or policemen or whatever you want to call them, patrolmen. And the gag is constantly, oh, it's a slow day. Sorry, hopefully something more exciting will turn up.
Yeah. I feel like in the 70s and 80s, they just became glorified Boy Scouts.
And they just became so pathetic. Like they just
Yeah.
needed saved all the time. Like that original standard that folk had for them, that should
Yeah.
be the standard. That should be the Phantom's standard.
Like you see the stories where it's like, 10,000 or 10,000 people apply, 1,000 are submitted for training, and, 1 out of 10 gets chosen. and look, we've all seen the movies, we've read the books, we've read the comics and all that. We've seen like the Commandos, we've seen the SAS, we've seen the Delta and the Navy SEALs. The Jungle Patrol should be discussed at the
But
top thing.
yeah,
There was a story, it was drawn by Paul Ryan. I think it's called The Invisible Phantom, where you've got a CIA operative or trainer actually comes to the Jungle Patrol, and that's what it should be like, because he talks about, I'm coming to teach them, but I'm also coming to learn from them as well. Is the Jungle Patrol needs to be cutting edge. They need to be like
yeah,
the best fighting, and the purpose is they're not a private army. They're there to fight crime as an extension of the fandom, in so to speak. So they should be, what would you call it? They should be deployed into Nigeria and fighting, fighting people who are trying to do child soldiers or conflict
yeah,
diamonds and people that are, hijacking ships out at Yemen and stuff like that.
yeah,
That's what they should be doing as well. Okay, so we've talked about a fair few things. You made mention of bad guys. Now, I just want to quickly again touch upon this. We're going to be flying all over the place, so I
yeah.
hope our listeners are keeping up.
Oh, they're loving it.
Um, yeah, well, we are, so that's all that matters. Um, so you made mention of the bad guys in the earlier years being the over the top theatrical.
Yeah, they're very
Um,
suave and charming, and they're evil, but you still like them.
Yeah, yeah. Does the Phantom need more memorable bad guys? Like, I feel like Tony Paul has created some good, memorable
Yeah,
bad guys with Chadu the Python, with the Nomad, and even lesser likes like Jumper and stuff like that have got that memorable moments. I feel like Lee Falk kind of didn't really have that. I felt like General Babubu just became a joke.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we all got sick of him.
I feel like Team Phantomin have probably done
Yeah,
better bad guys
Bulk
from.
never really wanted to repeat his like when you think about Sala, that's one of the only villains that's reoccurred, and
Mm,
we love her.
yeah,
She's on everyone's list of top baddies for a reason. And then there's the Marshall sisters who weren't baddies, but they're one of some of the very few recurring characters, and we love them. So I don't know. It's obvious when you look at like Batman and Spider-Man and the Flash and all the Captain America. They've all got rogue galleries, like repeating characters. Some of them are very silly, very over the top. I like Fox characters. I like the crooner. I like Bent Beak Broder. I like all these characters, but you just never see them again.
yeah,
It's such a shame. Like I wish that we had have seen more appearances of the Sing. I mean, we see the Sing all the time now in modern stories. Like we probably see too many Sing stories, but he barely did anything with the Sing.
yeah,
Like he
yeah,
referred to him a couple of times. One was, like the belt.
yeah. So like Phantomin have, and probably through to a lesser extent, like they've redone like the Vultures. Like the Vultures have had a bit of a renaissance.
Hate the vulture.
Um, sorry?
Hate the vultures.
Really? What
Yeah,
don't you
that
like about the
stupid V on their
Vultures?
head. No,
Yeah, the
no.
V's a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah. Get rid of the V. I
Um,
might like him a bit more, but I think just visually, I just think, oh, not those guys.
But I think what makes them so good is that they're so despicable, preying on the
Yeah,
weak and the dying, and they're
but they're too
so
despicable. You know,
sorry.
they're too
Yeah,
despicable. I think that's another reason I don't like them.
yeah, yeah. Okay, fair enough. One that I think that we probably haven't seen enough is the Hydra.
Yeah.
Phantom Men of like they've had Princess Sin. Another one that I looked at recently was Vista Rista. I'm not sure if you remember her, but one of the stories that has been published in Frew is the Phantom's unknown sister.
Oh, okay. I don't think I
Um,
know it.
where there was this runaway troubled youth, and Vista Rista, um, what would you call it? She conned this girl into making her believe that she was the Phantom's sister. This girl troublemaker kind of comes around and just kind of wreaks havoc with the Phantom for a little while.
Yeah.
And it's all been a ploy by Vista Rista. So I
Is it
think,
80s, 90s, 2000s?
yeah, 80s,
Yeah.
80s. So that's one thing that I think the Phantom could improve on is bad guys.
Yep.
Um, I love the fact that you never like with Batman, it becomes a running joke. You know, how many times does the Joker have to die or Two-Face
Yeah.
and stuff like that, and they're too over the top and they're unbelievable. Where I guess after dealing with the Phantom once, that's probably enough for you. You probably want to
Yeah.
either go straight or go away. But I just wonder if having a little bit more of flamboyant bad guys could help.
I don't know. I think the original baddies, the ones that I liked the most, they were flamboyant. Like
Mm,
they were great as they were. They didn't have to have silly costumes or makeup like DC. Because in comparison to DC, like Phantom is pretty much real world. And I suppose the Phantom does only have to defeat them once, and they all go to prison or they get the skull mark. But there's characters which I would like to have seen, repeated. And I think it's sort of a problem that maybe it's not a problem, but Falk didn't utilize the supporting cast enough. He
yep.
had terrific characters like Jimmy Wells and Phyllis, and he had, Melville and Byron, like
Brian, yeah.
all these terrific characters that he used really well for a while, and then they all just sort of slip away, and that's
Yeah.
it. You never hear from them ever again. So the supporting cast that you end up having, like through the 40s right up to the 60s, is like virtually no one apart from Garan and certain tribes, Longo and Wambezi. And then in the 60s and 70s, he starts to have a few more reoccurring
Like
important characters.
Luaga
Yeah,
and
yeah, exactly.
Colonel Werribee and
Mr.
yep,
Tamaga, or whatever her name was.
yep,
I don't know why there was that shift. Like he started to realize that maybe he needed more of a cast. You think back to Stan Lee and Spider-Man. Like Spider-Man had a massive cast, friends. I really enjoy reading the old Spider-Man characters because I like the friendships and I like the romances and the difficulties that arose outside of his superhero life, but in his everyday life. And the Phantom's a different situation because the Phantom doesn't really have like a civilian life. But having some reoccurring characters, including baddies, I think would have been really good. But not costume themed characters. Although even some of the costumed characters, like the super apes, they were cool. There were
yeah,
so many people that dressed up as apes back in those days.
yeah, yeah. I think that's probably one thing that Tony DePaul has probably added, and I think it should be congratulated, is that there is a wider cast now.
Yeah,
Um,
he's doing great. Like I hope he watches this because I think like the new characters he's introducing, the relationships, the romance, the adventure, the fun, the memorable baddies. Like he's doing
yep.
such a good job of um of the legacy of the Phantom. So well done to
Mm,
him.
mm. All right, we're going to change tack a little bit. Now, I want to spend the next couple of minutes talking about historical based stories because, as you made mention, and the beauty about the fandom is that there's 21 fandoms. Well, if you add Defenders of the Earth and add the future stories by Phantom Men that they've created, there's now 31 different Phantoms, which is 500 years ago and a couple of hundred years in the future. So there's a lot of scope for creators to be able to create. We'll put aside your argument about the 21st Phantom should be in the 30s and
Yeah,
40s and everyone else putting them in the 2020s. Because Phantom Men love their historical stories. Now, I love the historical stories as well. Personally, I think sometimes we deal a little bit too much in the political side of, Protestant versus Catholics and stuff like that. But so for historical based stories, what's important for those stories in your opinion?
Well, this will sound basic, but they've got to be interesting. Some of those stories are fantastic, and some of them are really, really boring. They just get like bogged down so much in history. And I don't want to criticize anyone because I know, some people must love those stories and the writers feel that it's important and they want
Mm,
to.
mm.
And maybe because we're a young nation as well, we don't have a long history.
Yeah,
Um, and some of the stories are coming out of countries where there's the very, very long and proud history. So the Phantom is entwined in a lot of their political and historical events as much as they do.
yeah. I
Um,
think that's a good point that you're making there.
some of those stories can be a bit tedious when, like, there's just so much exposition and backstory about some events that really don't have much to do with the story. You just
So
want
how would you, so as a writer, because
mm,
you wear two hats, well, three if you include the two, drawing and writing stories as well as being a fan. How do you what's the best way to set up the story? Because you don't want to do you just throw the reader into it and then they're spending the whole time going, hang on, who are the Jacobites and who are the
yeah,
Roundheads and, um, which Queen Elizabeth is this? So how do you get people interested without having to get out an encyclopedia or go into Wikipedia and learn about the history of, how do you do that? Like for you, and this is just your opinion, this is just my opinion, what's that balance of giving them a little
yeah.
bit of information, so they can read the story and enjoy the story? So like where do you go from there?
Well, and this is one of my favorite things about the Phantom, that you can you can set a Phantom story anywhere in the last 500 years without having to worry about some stupid time machine or something like that.
Or a
You know,
Dalek if you're
yeah.
a Doctor Who fans.
Yeah. So, and you were saying, like, how do you get a story that people can enjoy without having to go to Wikipedia? That's the trick, isn't it? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're
Um,
lucky if you're a writer because you might really love some historical event that happens anywhere in the world in the last 500 years and find a way to put the Phantom in that timeline and to meet certain people, like the story where he meets Rembrandt. I love that one because it's still a really interesting story, and you don't have to know every single thing about Rembrandt's life and the
yep.
whole thing about how he used that paint that was toxic, and the people that look up close and see the Phantom's face, they,
I
the
love that. I love that
yeah,
element. I love that element.
like that is a really good story. And you might not know or care about Rembrandt, but you read the story and go, oh, okay, so he was an artist, he's a real artist. This story's interesting.
Mm.
Stories where the Phantom meets Napoleon, or there's a brief encounter with some historical king or queen or something like that. I think, like, to the writers, just please make it interesting. Don't make it into a history lesson that the Phantom plays no role in. The Phantom story, the same as Spider-Man's story, same as Batman's story, the story has to work because the character's in it and the character is leading the story. If the Phantom is just going along with it with historical events and having no part in it whatsoever, then why even write the story? Like, it's not a Phantom story.
Again, I don't think it's something we're going to solve in this podcast. I'm trying to keep it as snappy and just kind of touch
Yeah.
upon as many elements as possible. One thing I think is underutilized, and this is one thing that I think Jim Shepard did brilliantly, and I loved what he did, is he would often put like an editorial piece
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
actual comic, which was a little bit more allow the reader. And I like history, I like learning stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do it when I'm watching a movie or something. I'm going, where's that person from? And I'll go onto Wikipedia, and then I'm 4 or 5 Wikipedia pages afterwards, and I'm going, hang on, is this a real story or whatever? So I think I think Paul Mason kind of touches upon. he's, I think he's good at allowing the Phantom to play in a history moment without it taking too center stage. I'm not sure if that kind of makes sense, but
Yeah.
I think you have to be able to show a little bit of history. You have to be able to give a little bit of context. I'm not quite sure how you do that, but I think an editorial page can be helpful. So yeah, so it's interesting. I also would like the Phantom to fight less political battles. Is the Phantom religious? Is he a Christian? Is he a Protestant or is he a Catholic? Who knows? It doesn't
Yeah.
really matter. If he sees injustice,
Yep.
he's going to go against it. If he sees a Christian beating a Muslim, he's
Yeah.
going to punch that Christian in the face. Doesn't
Like
matter whether he's a Christian or whatever. He sees
yeah.
something wrong, he's going to do.
The Golem story was one I liked when I
Yeah,
was young because there was Jewish people being persecuted, and the Phantom just saw that that situation was wrong,
yeah,
and he helped. And that's what the Phantom should be like. Like he shouldn't be going around the world and getting involved in politics and taking sides and different things. He should just be there looking for injustice and
yeah,
helping people out. And I think a lot of writers like they might come up with an idea. Oh, I want to have a story where the Phantom interacts with Shakespeare. I want to have a story where he meets Mark Twain. Like there's all these different scenarios. Just yeah, make it interesting, and don't have the Phantom like impact whole world history. Like maybe yeah, I don't know. We could go on forever about this, but Golem in particular was a great story which talked about racism and prejudice without getting like super bogged down in why and what the historical context was. It was just the Phantom doing the right thing
yeah.
because that's what he does.
And that's who the Phantom is. He does the right thing. Doesn't matter what color they are, what religion they are, what creed they are, whether whether they're, what is it, a cross, what are whether they wear a cross or whether they wear rosary beads or
Yeah.
whatever. It doesn't matter. That's beside the point. He sees injustice, he will fight against it. A really good point. All right, another thing I wanted to touch upon, and again, we're short and sharp, trying to get through as much as possible. And look, if there's something that really needs to be discussed in a longer form, we will do that later down the track. Is the point of view in the storytelling? I'm not an English teacher, I'm not a writer. So most of the time we're not kind of behind the Phantom's eyes. We're kind of like a
Mm.
fly in the wall, so to
Yeah.
speak. Do you think anything like that is important in the elements to be able to for a good Phantom story?
Yeah, I enjoy it when one comes along, and it's pretty rare for some reason. But occasionally you'll get a story which is from someone else's point of view, and
Mm.
they're the victim or they're the person that needs help. And I like it. I like to see their
Do you
reaction.
remember the Psychopath? I think it's issue 1209 or 1201 or something, where it's a guy's in a mental institution in Rhodia. And Dr. Cartwright,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
male version, he comes in and he's interviewing this person and he's retelling the story of being hunted by this masked jungle demon.
yeah,
And he's like at the end of it, he kind of attacks Dr. Cartwright and he's got the
yeah. I do
skull of
remember
this.
it. Yeah,
That was one of my all-time favorite stories because it's from a different point of view. So yeah.
I like the one just recently. I feel bad. I can't remember the name of it, but the young artist that was drawing all the demons, and he had that was. I thought that was a good one. I tried this out with um, Into the Phantom. I had Dave Palmer. I had his thoughts, like his narrative, and I also had the Phantom's narrative, like up there on in the panels. And I realized as I was doing it that I couldn't think of too many stories where that had happened.
Mm.
It's more of a thing that you'd see in other companies, and I guess sometimes folk would do it, but not throughout a whole story. The Belt, for example. If you go back and read the Belt, there's quite a bit where the Phantom is talking. He's narrating the story to no one really, to the audience. But yeah, I think point of view. If I don't know why it doesn't happen more in the Phantom, but I enjoyed doing it, and it seemed like people liked it in Into the Phantom. But yeah, maybe there's scope for more of that sort of thing.
Mm, mm.
As long as it
It's
doesn't get too like the story should tell itself visually as well. Like you don't want to throw a lot of exposition in there that'll bog down the story. I tried to keep it relevant and interesting and not overdo it.
the DC regular series by Luke McDonnell and Mark Hyden, I think it was. That had a real behind the mask of the Phantom. You were like seeing his thoughts and all that, but you don't really see much of the Phantom. Does the Phantom not talk enough? Should he be more dialogue-y? Should he? Is the Phantom a stoic type of person that, he might say three or four lines? Is he all action, no words? Like,
Yeah. Well, they gave Batman Robin basically because they felt like the Batman wasn't talking. They needed some dialogue. And I think the Phantom has Devil and he has Hero when he's out and about. And there's scenes where he talks to himself. I've always enjoyed reading what the Phantom's thinking.
all right, one of the last things I want to talk about is we've talked about the story styles like mystery, thriller, action. We've talked about bad guys. We've talked about historical based stories and what's important with those. We've kind of skirted along the edges, but what are some important laws that stories need to include? Like we know the Phantom's not Tarzan and Batman, but how do writers and creators portray that the Phantom is the Phantom and he's not one of
Yeah,
those? Now, some of the obvious things are old jungle sayings.
yeah,
I feel like when I'm reading a Phantom story and there's a creator who has written a lot of stories or understands who the Phantom is, or even is lucky enough, like yourself, Andreas and Duncan and Peter and stuff like that, who were fans who grew up on the Phantom. They add old jungle sayings. It's
yeah,
almost like if a creator kind of earns their stripes or becomes a proper Phantom creator when they know to put in an old jungle saying.
yeah. It's a rite of passage. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And
I I always go back to the original Phantom stories for reference, almost like the Bible. Like you go back and you get your source material right. And I noticed that early on in the Phantom series, Lee Falk was making it clear to a lot of people that the Phantom was just a man. Like
yeah,
Diana, she found out straight away, but she would tell people. When she was engaged to that guy Bob, she told him basically the Phantom's whole secret. The witch doctors knew. Um, there's guys from Interpol or somewhere like that, and they all knew. Like the Phantom's secret in the early days was out. Like it just seemed like the only people who were dumb enough to fall for it were the natives, which was culturally insensitive. Apart from the witch doctors who knew, and all of the criminals and the sailors because they were all just idiots. Lee Falk steered away from that, and I think that's an important Phantom law that really no one should know about the Phantom's secret.
yeah.
And that's important for the Jungle Patrol. It's important for the jungle in general. It's important for criminals. Like, really, no one should know.
Mm,
That's to me that's a very important law that Lee
yeah.
Falk um, did.
Readjusted.
Yeah, he readjusted. Yeah, good way of putting it. He realized it was important.
Yeah. There was a story by Herms, the President Kennedy story where like literally you got the Phantom walking down Main Street in his purple costume and he's talking to the palace guards. And it's just like that's not the Phantom. He's not your friendly neighborhood spider who just
Yeah,
swings in and for a visit and the fan. Oh, how you going, fandom? How's your wife? How's your kids? And how's the dog? And
Yeah,
and how's your tomato plants? Are they all going good? That's not the
yeah.
Phantom. It's like, does the Phantom exist? I don't know. Have you seen the Phantom? Well, my great
My
grandfather saw him
grandfather saw him
when
when
he
he,
was,
yeah, yeah. See,
you
I
know,
prefer that. There's plenty of stories where the Phantom has gone to visit some kingdom, and like everyone in the whole kingdom has seen him. And I did it
yeah,
myself with when he went to visit Rex. Like everyone came out to welcome him, and I had mixed feelings about that in my own story. Because I like it when no one knows who he is. Like people don't
yeah,
even believe he exists. But you got to balance it with the story. Like there are stories where whole communities meet him. Like everyone in the jungle should believe in him. They have to believe in him, but not all of them have to have seen him.
yeah. So is he like, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny? You might believe him, you might not, or like, and I think that's important. I think you need to realize, and creators, King Features, everyone needs to realize that the Phantom is mysterious, and that's what we talked
Yeah,
about before. So yeah, we could be walking in the
yeah,
morning and we see Bob over there, we see our neighbor over there. You might go through your whole life and you would never see the
yeah,
Phantom. You might see a bad guy and he might have a
yeah,
skull mark on his face, and he'll talk about some jungle demon that knocked him out because he was, trying to kill a rhino for its horns or something like that. But it's not like you can go for a walk
yeah,
throughout the jungles and bump into the Phantom, and then you
yeah.
can go have a coconut together and go
Yeah.
for a frolic on the golden sands of
And
Keelawee.
if you're an evildoer, whether you're in the jungle or if you're working at the docks or on the other side of the world, that you got that sense all the time that if the Phantom turns up, we're in trouble.
Yep.
There's so many excellent stories where the
Mm.
fear of the Phantom
Yeah.
spread quickly because someone thinks that the Phantom might have been on the ship.
Yeah, yeah. What was that? It was an old Cy Barry story where the Phantom is in town, and then like they're all like, "Hey, did you hear that?" I think it's the normal life. I think
Yeah,
towards the end of that, where he talks about, hey, if you're planning something tonight, don't do it. The Phantom's in
yeah,
town,
yeah.
and I think that is what like the only people that fear the Phantom are
Mm.
as if you're doing something wrong.
And then there's other stories like the 12 tasks or whatever it's called, where the Phantom, like some prince kidnaps Diana and the
Yep.
Phantom to these 12 feats. And one of them is that there's no crimes committed in that town. And the people in the town have learned about the Phantom and they've learned that he's doing these impossible tasks. And they all commit to not committing crime. And it's not out of fear, it's because like they like him. I always thought like there's a balance there. Like you've got to have stories where people are aware of the Phantom, but he's so mysterious and he could, he could appear at any time. He takes different forms. But
It's
there's
like a respect. So if
yeah,
you're a good person or an average person, let's just say, like you and I, we're not going to go around and poach or push drugs or whatever. That's just we're a normal law abiding citizen. We're going to have a respect towards the Phantom because he
yeah,
means no ill will towards us because we're not going to do anything that deserves a skull mark. And then I think even the bad guys, you see even bad guys learn to respect him because of, who he is and stuff like that. Um, One of the other things I want to talk about, and we made mention about this earlier in the podcast, is the Phantom. He's always trained to be the Phantom, and that's because of the oath and then the unbroken lineage of 21 Phantoms and stuff like that. And I think this is important to include. And I'll go almost as far as saying, and I know you're going to agree with this because you actually created a poster and an image for this, but one of the things that made in Australia in Frew the Phantom so popular is that in every single comic it had a for those who came in late.
yeah,
And I think that's one of the reasons why I was so excited about it with the current daily story is that Tony DePaul created the first 2 weeks of that story, which was not a modified, but an extended for those who came in late. And I feel like that is super important because
Mm.
every comic, every story could be a jumping in point for a new reader.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why the oath, the old jungle sayings, are for those who come in late, and understanding these story elements is important because you have to be able to read a comic and be able to go, oh, I know who the Phantom is because I read this story. You know, to be able to then kind of go, oh, hang on, you've read a story, but you've enjoyed that. But if you want to actually know who the Phantom is, you got to read story this.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. You know, we were lucky when we were kids reading The Phantom. Almost every issue would have a page that told the story of the Phantom. And I know I've probably said this one on a podcast before. A friend of mine in comics, um, who has a massive, massive collection of comics and is very knowledgeable about comics. He really surprised me one day when he said, "Matt, what? I don't get the Phantom. What's going on with the Phantom?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I've tried buying Phantoms. I've got a whole stack of them. I don't understand what's going on. They're all over the place." And I realized that if that's his experience, and he's like a real comic nuffy, as you'd say, he's never seen it. He's never read
Yeah.
what we took for granted. So that's why I put it into the Phantom. No, I think it should be in every single comic.
Yeah, I agree. It should be in every single comic. And it doesn't have to be half the story. You know, Lee Falk would just do it as one day at the start of a lot of stories where it's
Yeah,
just retelling it in 4 panels
yeah,
or one panel or whatever. And you could be even like in some of the Sunday stories, I think it was The Visitor, and then there was another story which I can't remember, where Tony DePaul adds it in the middle of the story, and it only takes up like half the Sunday. So I think when you're creating stories, and look, it's easy just to be able to, instead of having an advert or a message from the publisher, I would rather get it for those who come in late than a message from the publisher or an
yeah,
advert or even, something like that. But I think every comic, every story needs to have some of these elements that we're talking about, but like a jungle saying, an oath, for those who have come in late and stuff like that, just to be able to help establish who the Phantom is.
yeah, yeah. I
And
think
look,
the,
there
I
you
was
go.
going to say that the first Phantom comics I bought had that in it. And so it took me a little while to understand what was going on as far as who Diana was and why in one comic they were married, in the next comic they were engaged, and that there was different settings. But
Yeah,
all that, once you buy 3 or 4 comics, you that's what's going on. It's the same as any, if you start collecting X-Men or Spider-Man or whatever, it'll take you a little while
yeah,
to figure out what's going on.
yeah,
But having a short, even if it's a half page or a full page or 4 panels, that just has the basic premise of what's going on, that worked wonders for me when I was 9 years old. I knew straight away what was going on. And then I wasn't surprised when I'd read a story that was based 200 years ago because there was a context. But yeah, my friend Brendan, Brendan Halliday, hello, Brendan, he just was baffled. He had no idea what was going on.
Mm. All right, so we've talked about old jungle sayings, the oath for those who have come in late. Are there any other important laws? Um,
Yes, yes, there are, and some people would disagree, but I think there's stories that have said that the Phantom's costume has been the same for the whole time. I'm all about that. I think the first Phantom, right through today, should have the same costume. I see a lot of variations, and I might be unpopular, but I'm going by what folks said when Diana was digging through the costumes, and the Phantom said we've always worn the same, right? No variation.
yeah,
Drinking alcohol, to me, that's a law that I could care less about. I know some people feel strongly about it. I don't think it's smart for the Phantom to go into a bar and order milk. I think that was, yeah, I think it's dated and silly. I think him not drinking is a strange thing. I understand from a point of view that maybe he wants to be active and ready to go all the time and not to be,
So,
um,
so just on that, I there was a job role where basically, oh, okay, so it was I read a role for a pastor, right? For those who don't know, I come from a religious background. And in there, it was as a pastor, which is you are basically on call any time of the day. Like, someone in your church could get bad news. You got to be there. Could get hit by a car and you got to go to hospital and stuff like that. And in the role description, it was that you have to legally remain sober at all times because of your role. You have to be there to, um, be there for someone at any time. So you legally have to be sober. And I feel that's very similar as the Phantom is. The Phantom could be called into action at any
yeah,
time. The bad guys don't rest at night time, they rest during the day. So for me, I feel like the Phantom has to remain sober at all times because you never know when he is going to have to be called
yeah.
into action.
How do you feel about no killing?
Okay, the no killing. For me, it has to be no killing as a general law. Like, you don't kill unless it's a kill or be killed situation.
Yeah,
And even then, you try and get out of it.
I feel the
Um,
same way.
there was a story called, I think it's The Ghost or The Ghost Who Returns. It's by Jamie Valve, where
Yeah, I know the one. Yeah,
Rush is fighting against the Rougemont, French crime family.
yeah.
And the
Return of the
guy
Ghost.
Yeah, The Return of the Ghost. It's been published twice by Frew. Amazing story.
Yeah, it's good.
Um,
Excellent.
where he's facing off against the guy, and I think the story really highlights this dilemma. And the guy shoots the Phantom. And the Phantom doesn't do anything. He could shoot him back, but he's like, nope. And then he shoots him again, and he's still coming towards him, and he shoots him again. And then he's like, man, I've shot you 3, 4 times. You are a ghost. You're the ghost who returns. And it creates that legacy piece. But like and then at the end, it's like, hey, that was stupid. You got shot 3, 4 times across the room. That was, sheer
Idiocy.
idiocy. That's the word. But, you know, was that too far? Or was that keeping the legend of the Phantom alive, even at the danger of yourself?
Yeah, yeah, that was pretty reckless. And like we know the Phantom, like in that scene, was the Phantom like he had his guns?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean we know the Phantom can shoot guns out of people's hands.
I will admit, I find that pretty ridiculous. Like, I
Yeah,
remember one story, I think it was the assignment in Riga, which was in issue 1114 or something, where he shoots a rear vision like a rear mirror which ricochets and takes the gun out of the guy's hands. Like I think shooting the gun and is ridiculous, where I think shooting him in the hand so that his
yeah,
hand could be shot up or something is a little bit
yeah,
more realistic.
yeah,
But shooting the gun and not injuring, like, oh, hey, my hand's
yeah,
not bloody or anything, I think that's a bit silly.
yeah. Yeah, look, it's funny, isn't it? Like I enjoy stories where the Phantom spares lives, but I like the stories where he kills people too. You know,
Mm.
there's scenes in Little Toma where it's unclear if he's just shot a bunch of people. Like they call it a dog fight and they're shooting like crazy. Then there's like bodies lying all over the floor, but has the Phantom just like injured them or has he killed them all?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he's killed people in pretend like depending on how you read the scene, way back in the Sing Brotherhood, he killed someone or a couple of people. And
Yep.
then
Diamond Hunters, he killed
Diamond
people.
Hunters.
Phantom goes to war, he would have killed people. And then he kind of goes against that. And then it wasn't until Prince Rex, before it was Prince, gets kidnapped by a witch doctor, and then you see him actually like shoot the witch doctor in the chest.
Yeah,
And then that was the only time Lee Falk had actually done that, or Lee Falk Barry.
yeah,
And then Tony DePaul has had the Phantom kill people in some of his
yeah,
terrorist
yeah. He's killed a heap of
battles and
people,
stuff like that
but
as
the
well.
Phantom's racked with guilt over that, which I thought was a
Yeah.
really, really good way to handle it.
Mm.
So it shows like the Phantom has like integrity and he has
Yeah.
morality. Like we like him because he's a good guy. He's not the Punisher. He's not someone that like I think that's what you want in a hero. That's like one of my number one things is that he's not a killer, but in the cases when he has, it's been fair enough, and it's been kill or be killed. You know, like
Yeah.
none of those people in the stories I've mentioned, he's just like killed them just for the sake of killing them. Like he had to do it,
Yeah.
or he's done it to protect someone else. Like there was a scene where he shot a police chief. I think it was in the story, the game of Elvar, where like he's got the governor, and then he notices that the police chief is going to shoot him. He whips around and shoots him, kills him. Great. Yeah, so we talked about the Phantom costume, milk and alcohol. We talked about killing people, um, jungle sayings. I think they're the things that I look for.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Well, these are all important elements, all important story elements that we've talked about. Um, Look, fans, I hope you've enjoyed that. We've rattled on for a good 90 minutes, talking about what we've liked. Now, we're not saying that we're the bee's knees, that creators have to follow what we're doing. It's we are fans first. We are fans. We love the character. We've read the character for decades. Yes, we're that old. Um, and we love the Phantom. We've studied the Phantom. And for us, for a couple of Aussie guys down under, this is what is important in our Phantom stories. Now, obviously, as there are fans around the world, they'll be slightly different and stuff like that as well. But yeah, look, hopefully you've enjoyed that, Matt. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed geeking and nerding out with me.
Yeah, very much so. It's always a pleasure. Like, what better thing than to talk about the Phantom for 80 minutes?
Yeah, that's it. Look, thank you for listening and watching us. Our website is chroniclechamber.com. One of our next podcasts, we are actually going to be asked, we have asked some fans and creators to submit to us their review of their personal favorite Phantom story or comic. Now, this is something that Matt's done. And we've got a couple of others as well. Now, if this interests you and you would be interested in submitting your review, give us an email, chroniclechamber@gmail.com. Email us, and then we can talk about exactly what we need in more detail. And then we would love to be able to have your review on one of our future podcasts as well. Now, we would love to hear your thoughts, feedbacks, and opinions on this podcast, plus anything else on our social media platforms or over at the YouTube channel. You can subscribe to us via YouTube or through your favorite podcast app, which includes iTunes or Spotify. Thank you. Please get in contact with us. And for myself, happy phantoming. You can say happy phantoming.
Okay. Happy Phantoming. Also, I really hope that people take up your offer and create some videos. I, for one, would love to see people just make a short video about their favorite story or a few of their favorite stories, particularly anyone out there that's well, I was going to say anyone out there who's created Phantom stories, but I don't care about that. I want Phantom fans, whether you're a creator or not, Phantom fans, to get in contact with Chronicle Chamber about making a little video. I would love to see what other people think.
Follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die. The Phantom, the ghost who walks. The Phantom, enemies beware. The Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom